The birthday candles cast dancing shadows across my kitchen table. 36 tiny flames that felt more like funeral pyres than celebration. I should have known something was wrong when Allison insisted on inviting her friends to what was supposed to be an intimate dinner. My wife stood at the counter, her back to me, shoulders rigid with the kind of tension that comes before bad news. "Rick, honey, can you grab more wine from the basement?" Her voice carried that artificial sweetness she used when she was about to drop a bomb. I'm Rick Harlan, by the way, 36 years old as of today, owner of Harlan Auto Repair, and apparently about to become the star of whatever drama my wife had cooked up with her little squad. I've always been good at reading people. Comes with the territory when you're fixing their cars and listening to their problems all day. Right now, every instinct I had was screaming danger. The doorbell rang before I could answer, and suddenly my house was invaded by the 3 women who'd been slowly poisoning my marriage for the past year. Jenna Walsh swept in first, all designer handbag and fake sympathy, followed by Mindy Chen with her perpetual party girl energy, and finally, Cami Rodriguez, quiet as always, phone already out and recording everything like she was documenting evidence. "Happy birthday, Rick." Jenna's voice dripped with the kind of enthusiasm you'd use to congratulate someone on their terminal diagnosis. "We brought champagne." Mindy was already popping the cork before anyone asked, foam spraying across my hardwood floors. "This is going to be such a memorable night." I caught Cami's eye as she positioned herself in the corner, phone angled to capture the whole room. Something cold settled in my stomach. This wasn't a birthday party. It was an execution, and I was the guest of honor. Allison emerged from the kitchen carrying my cake, a store-bought chocolate thing that looked like an afterthought. We'd been married 8 years, and she knew I preferred vanilla. The candles flickered as she set it down, and in that wavering light, I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. Not guilt, anticipation. "Make a wish, honey," she said, but her eyes were on her friends, not me. I closed my eyes and wished I was anywhere else. When I opened them, all 4 women were staring at me with expressions ranging from pity to excitement. Jenna was practically vibrating with barely contained energy. "So, Rick," Allison began, her voice taking on that rehearsed quality that meant she'd practiced this speech. "The girls and I have been talking." Here it comes, I thought. The moment my comfortable, predictable life goes straight to hell. "We've been discussing relationships, and what makes people compatible, and—" She glanced at her friends for support. Jenna nodded encouragingly. "Well, my friends and I decided you're not my type anymore. I think I should go back to my ex." The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because I was shocked, I'd suspected something was wrong for months, but because of the casual cruelty of it. On my birthday, in front of an audience, with my wife's friends nodding along like they were approving a restaurant choice. "Your friends decided," I repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the air. "All of you, together, like a committee vote." "It's not like that," Allison started, but Mindy cut her off. "Actually, it kind of is. We've been telling Allie for months that she could do better. She deserves someone more ambitious, more exciting. Someone like Brett Daniels," Jenna added with a smirk. "You remember Brett, don't you, Rick? Allison's ex from college, the one with the real estate empire?" I remembered Brett. Slick hair, expensive suits, the kind of guy who called everyone buddy and meant it as an insult. I also remembered seeing his Mercedes in my driveway last Tuesday afternoon when I came home early from work. "Ah," I said, standing up and brushing cake crumbs off my jeans. "So this is where we pretend I don't know you've been cheating with him for the past 3 months." The room went dead silent. Allison's face went white, then red, then white again. Her friends exchanged glances. Cami's phone was still recording, catching every second of the drama they'd orchestrated. Rick, Allison stammered, tears starting to flow. Real ones this time, not the crocodile tears she'd been practicing. "Save it," I said, my voice calm despite the rage building in my chest. "You want to know what I wished for when I blew out those candles? I wished for the truth. And here it is. My wife's been screwing her ex-boyfriend and needed her little cheerleading squad to give her permission to leave me. On my birthday." Jenna stood up, all righteous indignation. "You don't have to be cruel about it, Rick. Allison was trying to be honest with you." "Honest?" I laughed, and it came out darker than I intended. Honest would have been telling me before she started spreading her legs for Brett in our bed. Honest would have been divorce papers, not a public humiliation party. "Rick," Allison sobbed. "Please, don't what? Don't tell the truth? Don't point out that your friends have been planning this little intervention for months while you've been playing house with your ex?" I looked each of them in the eye, one by one. "Did you all vote on which nights she should cheat, or was that decision left up to the happy couple?" Mindy was the first to crack. "Look, we just want what's best for Allison. You two have grown apart, and Brett can give her things you can't." "Like what? Herpes? Because that's what he gave Jenny Morrison last year." The color drained from Allison's face. She hadn't known about Brett's reputation around town, but I'd heard the stories at Pete's shop. Small towns don't keep secrets long, especially when you're the guy everyone trusts with their cars and their gossip. "Get out," I said quietly. "All of you. Get out of my house." "Rick, we should talk about this," Allison started, but I held up a hand. "We'll talk, but not tonight, and not with your little support group here to hold your hand." I looked at Cami, still filming. "And turn off the damn phone. You've got enough footage for whatever social media circus you're planning." They filed out slowly, Jenna and Mindy whispering furiously to each other, Cami finally pocketing her phone, and Allison casting desperate looks back at me like she expected me to chase after her and beg her to stay. I didn't. Instead, I sat back down at my kitchen table, looking at the half-eaten cake and the champagne they'd left behind. In the sudden silence, I could hear Mrs. Weathers' television through the thin walls. She was probably watching from her window, taking notes for tomorrow's neighborhood gossip session. That's when I noticed Allison's phone on the counter, forgotten in her dramatic exit. She'd been clutching it all evening like a security blanket, and now it was mine. I picked it up, surprised to find it wasn't locked. The screen showed her last text conversation, and my blood ran cold as I read the messages from earlier that evening. "Are you sure about tonight?" Brett had written. "The girls think it's time. Jenna says I should just rip the Band-Aid off." "What about Rick?" "What about him? He'll get over it. He always does." I scrolled up, finding weeks of messages between my wife and her ex-boyfriend. Explicit photos, detailed plans for their meetings, discussions about my failings as a husband, my boring job, my lack of ambition. But it was the group chat with her friends that really made my blood boil. "Operation Free Allison is a go for tonight," Jenna had written that morning. "I still think we should have done this months ago," Mindy replied. "Better late than never. Rick's going to be devastated," Cami added. "Good. Maybe it'll motivate him to actually do something with his life," Jenna responded. I set the phone down carefully, my hands shaking with rage. This hadn't been a spontaneous decision or even a moment of weakness. This had been a calculated campaign to destroy my marriage, orchestrated by women who thought they knew what was best for everyone. The birthday candles had burned down to stubs, wax pooling on the table like tears. But I wasn't crying. I was planning. They wanted to play games? Fine. But they'd forgotten one important thing about mechanics. We know how to take things apart and put them back together. And sometimes, when something's broken beyond repair, the best thing you can do is scrap it for parts. I blew out the remaining candles, and in the darkness, I smiled for the first time all evening. The real party was just getting started. I spent the rest of that night going through Allison's phone like a detective working a murder case. What I found was worse than simple adultery. It was systematic character assassination. The group chat between my wife and her friends read like a manual for emotional warfare. Rick asked why I was working late again, Allison had written 3 weeks ago. I told him I was helping Jenna with a client presentation. Good cover, Jenna replied. How was your afternoon with Brett? Amazing. He took me to that new hotel downtown, the penthouse suite. Did you get pictures? This from Cami, always the documentarian. A few. Rick would die if he saw them. Maybe he should, Mindy chimed in. Might wake him up to what he's losing. I scrolled through months of messages, each one a fresh knife twist. They'd been documenting my marriage's destruction like it was entertainment. Every fight Allison and I had, every moment of distance between us, every small failure on my part had been dissected and analyzed by this tribunal of judgment, but it was the videos that really got to me. Cami, apparently, had a hobby of secretly recording people during their most vulnerable moments. She had footage of me working on cars, sweaty and covered in grease, with Allison's mocking commentary over it. This is what I come home to every night. Isn't it romantic? There were videos of me sleeping, of me watching TV, of me trying to have serious conversations with my wife while she texted her friends about how boring I was. I was a zoo animal in my own home, and I hadn't even known it. The worst part? The video from last Tuesday. I'd suspected Allison was having someone over while I was at work, but seeing the proof was different. Brett Daniels, in my living room, on my couch, with my wife. But it wasn't just the sex that bothered me. It was the conversation afterward. When are you going to tell him? Brett asked, lighting a cigarette in my non-smoking house. Soon. The girls think his birthday would be poetic. Seems cruel, even for you. Allison laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. Rick doesn't do subtle. If I don't make it dramatic, he'll just pretend everything's fine and try to work through it. This way, there's no going back. And you're sure about us? As sure as I can be. You're everything he's not. Successful, exciting, ambitious. The girls have been telling me for months that I settled when I married him. Brett stubbed out his cigarette on my coffee table, leaving a burn mark. What about the house? What about it? It's in both our names, but I can probably get him to sign it over. Rick's always been too trusting for his own good. I paused the video, staring at the burn mark on my coffee table. It was still there, a small scar I'd noticed but never questioned. Now I knew exactly how it got there. My phone buzzed, a text from Pete Morrison, my best friend and the owner of Morrison's auto shop where I'd worked before starting my own business. Heard about last night. Mrs. Weathers called my mom. You okay? I should have known the news would travel fast. Mrs. Weathers was the neighborhood's unofficial intelligence network, and Pete's mother was her lieutenant. By morning, half the town would know that Rick Harlan's wife had dumped him on his birthday. Fine, I texted back. Can we talk tomorrow? Come by the shop. I'll have coffee and sympathy ready. I set both phones aside and walked through my house, seeing it with new eyes. This place I'd called home for 5 years was just a stage set for my wife's deception. The bedroom where I'd slept next to a stranger, the kitchen where she'd planned my humiliation while making my breakfast, the living room where she'd entertained her lover while I was working to pay the mortgage. But I wasn't the same man who'd blown out birthday candles 12 hours ago. That Rick had been naive, trusting, willing to believe the best of people. This Rick had seen behind the curtain, and he didn't like what he found. I made a list, the same methodical way I approached any complex repair job. 1. Document everything. 2. Understand the full scope of the damage. 3. Identify the key players. 4. Plan the repairs. 5. Execute with precision. By dawn, I had copied every photo, video, and text message from Allison's phone to a secure drive. I'd also done some research on Brett Daniels, using the kind of internet detective skills you pick up when you're trying to source rare auto parts. Brett's real estate empire wasn't as solid as he pretended. He was leveraged to the eyeballs, with 3 mortgages on his lake house and a reputation for cutting corners on his developments. More interesting, he had a pattern of relationships with married women. I found references to at least 2 other affairs in the past 3 years, both ending badly for the women involved. Jenny Morrison had been right about the herpes. According to the medical records, I definitely didn't hack from the county health department. Brett was a walking advertisement for penicillin. At 7 a.m., I drove to Pete's shop, Allison's phone in my pocket like a loaded weapon. The morning was crisp and clear, the kind of Maine autumn day that usually made me grateful to be alive. Today, it just felt like good weather for revenge. Pete was already there, working on a transmission with the focused intensity that had made him the best mechanic in 3 counties. He looked up when I walked in, grease-stained hands never pausing in their work. "You look like hell," he said by way of greeting. "Feel worse." I grabbed a cup of coffee from the pot he always kept brewing. "How much did Mrs. Weathers tell your mom?" "Enough. Said she saw Allison and her friends leave your place around 9, all of them crying except for the quiet one with the phone. Cami Rodriguez. She was filming the whole thing." Pete's hands stilled on the transmission. "Filming what?" I told him everything. The birthday ambush, the group vote, the discovery of the affair. I showed him some of the text messages, watching his face grow darker with each revelation. "Jesus, Rick, this wasn't just cheating. This was a conspiracy." "Gets worse." I showed him the videos, including the one of Brett in my living room. Pete's jaw clenched when he saw the cigarette burn on my coffee table. "That smug bastard. I never liked him even in high school. Always thought he was better than everyone else. Still does, apparently. But here's the thing, Pete. They made one mistake." "What's that?" I smiled, and it felt predatory. "They underestimated me. They think I'm just some boring mechanic who'll roll over and take whatever they dish out. They have no idea what I'm capable of when someone tries to destroy my life." Pete grinned back, understanding immediately. We'd been friends since childhood, and he knew my capacity for creative problem-solving when someone crossed me. "What do you need?" "Information, mostly, and maybe some help with a few projects. Nothing illegal, nothing that'll get us in trouble. But I want them to understand that actions have consequences." "What kind of projects?" I pulled out my notebook, showing him the list I'd made. "Brett's got that Mercedes he's so proud of, right? The one he drives around town like it makes him special?" "Yeah, silver S-Class. Parks it in the fire lane at the grocery store because he thinks rules don't apply to him." I was thinking it might benefit from some mechanical attention. Nothing permanent, nothing dangerous. Just educational. Pete's grin widened. "I like where this is going." "And Allison's friends, they love their social media, love being the center of attention. Might be interesting to give them exactly what they want." "You're going to expose them?" "I'm going to let them expose themselves. See, they think they're so smart, but they documented everything. Every cruel comment, every manipulation, every moment of my humiliation. They handed me the ammunition to destroy them." Pete wiped his hands on a shop rag, giving me his full attention. "Rick, I'm all for payback, but you need to be careful. These aren't stupid people." "No, but they're arrogant people, and arrogant people make mistakes." I finished my coffee and stood up. "They want to play games with my life? Fine, but they're about to learn that I don't play fair." As I drove home, I passed Brett's lake house, the silver Mercedes gleaming in the driveway like a trophy. Inside, I could see movement. Probably Allison, already moved in and playing house with her upgrade. They thought they'd won. They thought the boring mechanic would just disappear quietly, maybe drink himself into depression or beg for reconciliation. They were about to discover how wrong they were. I had work to do. The next few days, I became a ghost in my own life. I went to work, fixed cars, made small talk with customers, all while planning the systematic destruction of the people who'd destroyed me. It was surprisingly easy to act normal when you had a purpose beyond just surviving each day. Allison came by Thursday afternoon to collect more of her things. She'd lost weight, probably from the stress of managing 2 relationships, and she kept glancing around like she expected me to start shouting or throwing things. "Rick, we need to talk about the house," she said, loading clothes into garbage bags with the efficiency of someone who'd been planning this move for months. "What about it?" I was sitting at the kitchen table, supposedly reading the newspaper, actually watching her every move. "I think it would be best if you signed your half over to me. I can refinance, take over the payments. It'll be cleaner for both of us." There it was, the financial component of her plan. She wanted the house, probably to sell it and split the proceeds with Brett for their new life together. "That's generous of you," I said mildly, taking on all that debt just to spare my feelings. She paused in her packing, trying to read my tone. "I know this is hard, Rick, but we both know this marriage has been over for a long time." "Have we? Because I thought we were just going through a rough patch. Turns out you were going through Brett Daniels." Her face flushed. "That's not fair." "Fair?" I set down the newspaper and looked at her directly. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been telling me you were unhappy before you started screwing your ex-boyfriend. Fair would have been marriage counseling instead of a tribunal with your friends. Fair would have been not humiliating me on my birthday for the entertainment of your little audience. The girls were just trying to help. The girls were trying to break up my marriage, and they succeeded. Congratulations to all of you." She finished stuffing clothes into the bag, her movements sharp and angry. "I'll have my lawyer draw up the paperwork for the house." "You do that. But Allison? You might want to get an STD test while you're at it. Brett's got quite the reputation around town." She went white, then red, then stormed out without another word. I watched from the window as she threw her bags into her car and peeled out of the driveway, tires squealing on the asphalt. Phase 1 complete. Now she'd be paranoid about Brett's fidelity, just like she'd made me paranoid about hers. Fair was fair. That evening, Pete and I met at his shop to work on our special project. He'd acquired Brett's Mercedes earlier that day, a simple matter of calling in a favor with Larry Hutchins, my cousin who worked for the county sheriff's department. Apparently, Brett's car had been randomly selected for an emissions inspection, and there were some irregularities that required immediate attention. "Beautiful machine," Pete said, running his hand along the hood. "Be a shame if something happened to it." "Nothing's going to happen to it," I corrected. "We're going to improve it." I'd spent hours researching the Mercedes computer system, finding exactly the vulnerability I needed. Modern cars are basically computers on wheels, and I'd always been good with computers. A few modifications to the dashboard display system, some creative rewiring of the horn, and Brett's pride and joy would become his public embarrassment. "Hand me that diagnostic cable," I said, sliding under the dashboard. "This is going to be beautiful." 2 hours later, we were done. From the outside, the Mercedes looked perfect. But the next time Brett started it up, he was going to get a surprise that would make my birthday party look like a friendly chat. "When do we test it?" Pete asked. "Tomorrow night. There's a party at his lake house. I saw the invitation on Allison's phone. All her friends will be there, probably celebrating their victory over the boring husband." "You're not actually going to crash the party, are you?" I grinned. "Not crash it. Just observe from a distance. Document the results of our handiwork." "Rick, that sounds like stalking." "It's research. I want to see their faces when they realize I'm not going quietly into that good night." Friday evening, I parked my truck in the woods about a quarter-mile from Brett's lake house, close enough to see the driveway but far enough away to avoid detection. The party was in full swing. I could hear music and laughter carrying across the water, the sound of people having the time of their lives at my expense. Brett's Mercedes sat in the driveway like a silver monument to his success. Around it were the cars of Allison's friends, along with a few others I didn't recognize. probably Brett's real estate buddies, here to celebrate his conquest of another man's wife. I settled in to wait, camera ready. At 10:30 p.m., the party started breaking up. I watched through my telephoto lens as guests stumbled out of the house, most of them drunk and loud. Jenna and Mindy were among the first to leave, both of them hugging Allison goodbye like they were sending her off to war instead of shacking up with her rich boyfriend. Cami was the last of the friends to go, and I noticed she spent a long time talking to Allison by the door, probably getting the full debrief on how wonderful life was without boring old Rick. Finally, around 11 p.m., Brett and Allison emerged together. He was wearing khakis and a polo shirt, the uniform of men who peaked in college. She was in a sundress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, and seeing her wear it for him felt like another small betrayal. Brett walked to his car with the swagger of a man who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. He held the door open for Allison, such a gentleman, then walked around to the driver's side. I held my breath as he turned the key. The Mercedes roared to life, and immediately the custom horn system I'd installed began blaring, "Cheater! Cheater! Cheater!" in a mechanical voice, loud enough to wake the entire lake community. The dashboard display, instead of showing the usual Mercedes logo, flashed, "Brett Daniels is a home wrecker," in bright red letters. Brett frantically tried to turn off the car, but I'd made sure the system would run for exactly 60 seconds before shutting down, long enough for everyone within a quarter mile to get the message. Through my camera lens, I watched Allison's face go from confusion to horror to rage. She was screaming at Brett, gesturing wildly at the car like it was his fault. Neighbors were coming out of their houses, drawn by the commotion. Someone was definitely recording this on their phone. Brett finally got the car shut off, but the damage was done. He stood there in his driveway, face red with embarrassment and rage, while Allison continued to berate him. I could read her lips. How could you let this happen? Like it was his fault that actions had consequences. I packed up my camera and drove home, whistling for the first time in weeks. Phase 2 was complete, and it had been even better than I'd hoped. But I wasn't done. Not even close. The next morning, I got a call from Cami Rodriguez. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "Do we? About what?" "About what you did to Brett's car. About what you're planning to do next. About what I know that you don't want anyone else to know." I paused, genuinely curious. "And what might that be?" "Meet me at the old drive-in theater tonight at midnight. Come alone." "Or what?" "Or I release the video of you breaking into Brett's car." I almost laughed. "Cami, I hate to break it to you, but I never broke into Brett's car. I'm a licensed mechanic who was asked to perform an inspection by the county sheriff's department. Everything I did was completely legal." Silence on the other end. "Midnight," she repeated, and hung up. Interesting. Cami thought she had leverage over me, which meant she didn't understand the game we were playing. She was still thinking like one of Allison's friends, trying to protect the group from consequences. But she'd made a mistake. She'd revealed that she was willing to negotiate, which meant she had something to hide. And if Cami Rodriguez had secrets, I was going to find them. The old drive-in theater had been closed for 15 years, but the screen was still standing, a monument to a simpler time when entertainment didn't require destroying other people's lives for social media content. I arrived early, parking where I could see the entire lot. Cami's car was already there, a little Honda Civic that screamed, "Responsible college graduate with student loans." She was sitting on the hood, phone in hand as always. "You came," she said as I approached. "You said you had something to tell me. I'm listening." She slid off the hood, suddenly nervous. "This has gone far enough, Rick. What you did to Brett's car was childish. What I did to Brett's car was justice. He destroyed my marriage. I embarrassed him in public. Seems like a fair trade." Allison was unhappy. Allison was manipulated by her friends into thinking she deserved better than the man who loved her. And you documented the whole thing like it was entertainment. Cami flinched. The videos weren't my idea. But you made them anyway. You recorded my private moments, my conversations with my wife, my humiliation at that birthday party. You turned my pain into content. I'm sorry about that, really. But if you don't stop this revenge campaign, I'll have to show people what you're really like. I stepped closer, and she backed up against her car. What am I really like, Cami? You're dangerous, obsessive. The way you've been planning all this, it's not normal. Not normal? I laughed, and the sound echoed off the old movie screen. You know what's not normal? Conspiring to destroy someone's marriage for entertainment, recording people without their consent, celebrating someone's pain like it's a victory. We didn't. You did. All of you. And now you're scared because you're realizing that actions have consequences. I pulled out my phone, showing her a screenshot of her own social media. Tell me, Cami, does your boss at the marketing firm know about your little hobby? The secret recordings, the invasion of privacy? Her face went pale. You wouldn't. I wouldn't have to. See, the thing about documenting everything is that it creates evidence. And evidence has a way of surfacing at the worst possible times. What do you want? I want you to understand something. I'm not the victim anymore. I'm not the boring husband who'll just roll over and take whatever you dish out. I'm the guy who's going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you really are. Rick, please? Please what? Please let you get away with destroying my life? Please pretend that what you did was okay because Allison was unhappy? I shook my head. It's too late for please, Cami. You should have thought about consequences before you picked up that camera. I walked back to my truck, leaving her standing alone in the abandoned drive-in. In my rearview mirror, I could see her frantically typing on her phone, probably warning the others that their former victim was fighting back. Good. Let them worry. Let them wonder what I was planning next. Because I was just getting started. The town festival was the perfect stage for the next act of my revenge. Every year, Millbrook celebrated its founding with a weekend of local vendors, live music, and enough gossip to fuel the rumor mill until Christmas. This year, I was going to give them something really worth talking about. I'd spent the week since my encounter with Cami preparing carefully. Mrs. Weathers had been invaluable, providing intelligence about Allison and her friends with the precision of a military strategist. Apparently, the Mercedes incident had caused quite a stir in their little circle. Jenna's been telling everyone that you've lost your mind, Mrs. Weathers reported over coffee on her back porch. Says you're stalking them, trying to sabotage Allison's happiness. And what does everyone else think? The elderly woman's eyes twinkled with mischief. Most folks think it's about time someone put that girl and her friends in their place. Brett Daniels never was popular around here, too full of himself. And Allison's been acting like she's too good for this town ever since she got that fancy job. Perfect. Public opinion was already shifting in my favor. Now I just needed to accelerate the process. The festival was held in the town square, with vendors set up around the gazebo and a small stage for local bands. I arrived early, positioning myself at Pete's booth where he was selling custom auto parts and offering free brake inspections. From there, I had a clear view of the entire festival. Allison and Brett arrived around noon, making their grand debut as a couple. She was wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month. He was in his usual polo shirt and khakis, looking like he'd stepped out of a country club catalog. They worked the crowd like politicians, Brett glad-handing potential real estate clients, while Allison played the role of the sophisticated girlfriend. To someone who didn't know the backstory, they looked like the perfect couple, but I knew better, and soon everyone else would too. Jenna, Mindy, and Cami formed their usual protective formation around Allison, like bodyguards protecting a celebrity. They'd clearly been briefed on my presence. I could see them scanning the crowd, whispering to each other whenever they spotted me. "You ready for this?" Pete asked, handing me a beer from the cooler under his table. "Born ready," I replied, checking my phone. Right on schedule, Larry Hutchins was walking toward the group, his sheriff's deputy uniform giving him an air of official authority. Larry was my cousin on my mother's side, and while he'd never break the law for me, he was more than happy to bend it a little for the sake of justice. He'd been at the birthday party, not invited, just stopping by to wish me well, and had witnessed enough of Allison's performance to form his own opinions about her character. "Excuse me, Ms. Harlan," Larry said, approaching Allison with his official voice. "I need to ask you a few questions about some property damage that was reported." The color drained from Allison's face. "Property damage?" "Someone vandalized a car belonging to Mr. Brett Daniels here. Damaged the computer system, caused quite a disturbance. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Brett stepped forward, puffing up like a rooster. "Officer, I already told your department that I suspect my car was tampered with by Allison's ex-husband. This is harassment." "Is it?" Larry pulled out his notebook, making a show of flipping through pages. "Because according to our investigation, the work on your vehicle was performed by a licensed mechanic during a routine county inspection. Everything was completely legal." "That's impossible. Are you questioning the integrity of our investigation, Mr. Daniels?" A crowd was gathering, drawn by the sight of a sheriff's deputy questioning the town's most prominent real estate developer. I could see phones coming out, people recording what looked like an official interrogation. "Now, Ms. Harlan," Larry continued, "I understand you were present when the incident occurred. Can you describe what you saw?" Allison looked around desperately, realizing that every word she said was being recorded by a dozen phones. We were just leaving a party, and the car started making noise." "What kind of noise?" It was saying things. About Brett. About our relationship." "What kind of things?" Brett grabbed Allison's arm. "We don't have to answer these questions without a lawyer present." Larry smiled. "You're not under arrest, Mr. Daniels. This is just a friendly conversation. But if you'd prefer to continue this down at the station—" No, that's not necessary," Brett said quickly. The crowd was growing larger, and I could see Jenna, Mindy, and Cami trying to push through to reach Allison. This was better than I'd hoped. They were making themselves part of the spectacle. "The car was calling him a cheater," Allison said quietly. "A cheater?" Larry wrote this down carefully. "And is that accurate?" What do you mean?" "Well, you're married to Mr. Rick Harlan, but you're here with Mr. Daniels. Would that make Mr. Daniels a cheater by definition?" The crowd murmured, and I could see the realization spreading through the gathered townspeople. This wasn't about vandalism. This was about adultery, betrayal, and public humiliation. Jenna finally reached Allison's side. "This is ridiculous. Allison and Rick are separated. She has every right to date whoever she wants." "And you are?" Larry asked. "Jenna Walsh. I'm Allison's friend and co-worker." "Ah, yes. You were at the birthday party where Ms. Harlan announced her intention to leave her husband. Several witnesses mentioned that." Jenna's face went red. "That was a private conversation. In a room full of people? With someone recording it on their phone?" Larry looked directly at Cami, who was trying to hide behind Mindy. "Ms. Rodriguez, isn't it? I understand you have quite a collection of videos featuring the Harlan family." Cami went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? Because we've had reports of unauthorized recordings, possible invasion of privacy. That's a serious charge in Maine." "You can't prove anything," Mindy said, stepping forward to defend her friend. "Can't I?" Larry smiled. "Ms. Patterson, you work at the bank, don't you? I'm sure your employers would be very interested to know about your involvement in this situation. Financial institutions take ethics very seriously." The crowd was eating this up. Small-town drama at its finest, with the added bonus of watching privileged people squirm under official scrutiny. I could see phones everywhere, recording every moment of their humiliation. "This is harassment," Brett said again, but his voice lacked conviction. "No, Mr. Daniels, this is consequences. You see, when you destroy someone's marriage in a small town, people notice. When you humiliate a well-liked local businessman on his birthday, people remember. And when you think you're too important for the rules that govern everyone else, people get upset." Larry closed his notebook and looked around at the crowd. "Now, I'm not saying anyone here broke any laws, but I am saying that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences come in ways you don't expect." He tipped his hat to the crowd and walked away, leaving Allison and her group standing in the middle of the festival like actors who'd forgotten their lines. The murmur of the crowd grew louder, and I could hear fragments of conversation. "Can you believe she left Rick for that sleazeball? On his birthday, too, that's just cruel. I always thought she was stuck up. Poor Rick, he's such a nice guy." Brett grabbed Allison's hand and tried to lead her away from the crowd, but everywhere they turned, people were staring, whispering, recording. They were trapped in their own scandal, and there was nowhere to hide. That's when I decided to make my entrance. I walked through the crowd, people stepping aside to let me pass. When I reached the center of the circle where Allison and her friends stood, the entire festival went quiet. "Hello, Allison," I said calmly. "Brett. Ladies, enjoying the festival." "Rick," Allison whispered, her voice barely audible. "I have to say this is much better than my birthday party. More people, better entertainment." I looked around at the crowd, all of them hanging on every word. "Though I have to admit, I'm surprised to see you all here. Thought you'd be too busy planning your next group vote to attend a small-town function." "Rick, please," Jenna started, but I held up a hand. "Please what? Please pretend that what you did was okay? Please act like destroying someone's marriage is just harmless fun?" I shook my head. "Sorry, but that ship has sailed." "You're making a scene," Brett said, trying to sound authoritative. "Am I? Because it seems to me like you made the scene when you decided to sleep with another man's wife. I'm just observing the results." The crowd chuckled, and Brett's face went red with embarrassment and anger. "You think you're so clever," Mindy said, stepping forward. "But everyone can see what you're really doing. This is pathetic." "Pathetic?" I smiled. "You know what's pathetic, Mindy? Spending your Friday nights planning other people's breakups, celebrating someone's pain like it's a victory, recording private moments for your own entertainment." I pulled out my phone, showing the screen to the crowd. "Would you like to see some of those recordings? I'm sure everyone would find them very educational." "You can't do that," Cami said desperately. "Those are private." "Private? Like my marriage was supposed to be private? Like my birthday party was supposed to be private?" I shook my head. "You gave up your right to privacy when you decided to document my humiliation." The crowd was completely silent now, waiting to see what would happen next. I had them all, Allison, Brett, and the 3 women who'd orchestrated my downfall, exactly where I wanted them. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the festival grounds. "You're all going to live with the consequences of your choices. Every day, in this small town where everyone knows everyone, you're going to face the people whose lives you tried to destroy for your own entertainment." I looked directly at Allison. "You wanted excitement, adventure, something better than boring old Rick? Congratulations. You've got it. But excitement cuts both ways, and adventures don't always end the way you expect." I turned to walk away, then paused and looked back at the group. "Oh, and Allison, you might want to get that STD test. Brett's track record isn't as clean as his car used to be." The crowd erupted in laughter and applause as I walked away, leaving my ex-wife and her friends standing in the wreckage of their reputations. But I wasn't done, not even close. The real show was just beginning. The festival confrontation was just the opening act. Within hours, videos of the encounter were circulating through every social media platform in town. Millbrook drama was trending locally, and suddenly everyone had an opinion about Allison Harlan and her friends. But it was the phone call I received that evening that really set the final act in motion. "Rick, it's Cami. We need to talk. Really talk this time." I was sitting on my back deck, enjoying a beer and the sound of my neighbors discussing the day's events over their own fence. Mrs. Weathers had already stopped by twice to share the latest gossip, and even she seemed impressed by how quickly public opinion had turned. "I'm listening," I said. "Not over the phone. Meet me at Morrison's Diner in an hour. And Rick, come alone and bring an open mind. There are things about this whole situation that you don't know." The diner was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few truckers and the night shift from the paper mill. Cami was sitting in a corner booth, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. Her phone was face down on the table, a first. "Thank you for coming," she said, as I slid into the opposite seat. "You said there were things I didn't know. I'm curious." She took a deep breath, like someone preparing to jump off a cliff. "The affair, the birthday party, all of it. It wasn't Allison's idea." "Whose was it?" "Jenna's. She's been planning this for almost a year, ever since Allison got promoted at the PR firm." I leaned back, processing this information. "Why?" "Because Jenna wanted Allison's job. She's been with the company longer, has more experience, but Allison got the promotion because she's married, stable, represents the company's family values better." Jenna was furious. The pieces started falling into place. So she decided to destroy Allison's marriage to make her less stable. Exactly. She introduced Brett back into Allison's life at a company party, kept pushing them together, convinced Mindy and me that we were helping Allison find happiness. Cami's voice was bitter. We were just pawns in her game. And the videos? Jenna's insurance policy. She wanted documentation of everything so she could control the narrative when it all came out. She planned to use them to show the company that Allison was having an affair, was unreliable, couldn't be trusted with major accounts. I stared at her, realizing the full scope of what had been done to all of us. Allison doesn't know. She has no idea. She thinks Jenna is her best friend, her biggest supporter. She doesn't realize that every piece of advice, every push toward Brett, every suggestion to leave you was designed to destroy her career. "Why are you telling me this?" Cami finally looked up, and I saw tears in her eyes. "Because what happened at the festival today made me realize how far this has gone. Jenna created a monster, and now it's destroying everyone in its path, including you. I'm not the one being destroyed anymore. Aren't you? Rick, look at what you've become. The revenge, the public humiliation, the systematic destruction of their reputations. This isn't who you were before all this started." She was right, and I knew it. The man who'd blown out birthday candles 2 weeks ago would never have orchestrated the kind of psychological warfare I'd been waging. But that man had been naive, trusting, willing to believe the best of people. "What do you want from me, Cami? Help me stop this. Help me expose what Jenna really did, what she's still doing. Because she's not done, she's planning something bigger." "Like what?" Cami pulled out her phone, showing me a series of text messages. "She's been in contact with someone at the local newspaper, feeding them a story about your obsessive behavior and stalking campaign. She's going to paint you as the villain in all this, make herself and the others look like victims of an unhinged ex-husband." I read the messages, feeling my anger build with each line. Jenna was planning to destroy me the same way she'd destroyed my marriage, systematically, methodically, using the truth as a weapon while hiding her own manipulation. "When does this story run?" "Monday morning. She's calling it When Divorce Turns Dangerous, a local woman's story of surviving her ex-husband's revenge campaign." Clever. Paint me as the aggressor, make them the victims. Very PR of her. "Rick, she's going to destroy you. Your business, your reputation, everything. She's already been spreading rumors that you're unstable, that people shouldn't trust you with their cars because you might sabotage them out of spite. I sat back, admiring the elegance of it despite myself. Jenna Walsh was good at her job. She'd identified a threat to her plans and was moving to neutralize it. If her story ran, everything I'd accomplished would be reversed. I'd go from justified victim to dangerous stalker in the court of public opinion. What do you propose we do about it? We give the newspaper a better story, the real story. Jenna's manipulation, the conspiracy to destroy Allison's marriage, the videos, all of it. Cami leaned forward. I have copies of everything, Rick. Every text, every video, every piece of evidence that shows how this really happened. And what do you get out of this? My conscience back, and maybe a chance to stop Jenna before she destroys someone else. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. Cami had been part of the conspiracy from the beginning, had recorded my most private moments, had participated in my humiliation. Could I trust her now? But then I realized it didn't matter. Whether this was genuine remorse or another manipulation, she was offering me something I needed, the truth. And the truth was a weapon I could use. All right, I said, let's burn it all down. We spent the next 3 hours in that diner booth, going through every piece of evidence Cami had collected. The scope of Jenna's manipulation was breathtaking. She'd been orchestrating events for months, pushing Allison toward Brett, while simultaneously documenting every step for her own purposes. Look at this, Cami said, showing me a text thread from 6 months ago. Jenna convinced Allison that you were having an affair with a customer. What customer? Jennifer Martinez. She brought her car to your shop for regular maintenance, and Jenna saw her there one day. She told Allison that Jennifer was too attractive to just be a customer, that the way she looked at you was suspicious. I remembered Jennifer, married mother of 3, drove a minivan that needed constant work. The idea that I was having an affair with her would have been laughable if it hadn't been so destructive. Allison believed it? She wanted to believe it. Jenna had been planting seeds for months about how you were holding her back, how she deserved better. The affair accusation gave her permission to stop feeling guilty about her own feelings for Brett. And you recorded all this? Everything. Jenna insisted on documentation. She said it was to protect Allison if you tried to fight the divorce. But really, she was building a case file to destroy Allison's career. By the time we finished going through the evidence, I had a complete picture of how my life had been systematically dismantled by a woman I barely knew, for reasons that had nothing to do with me. I was collateral damage in Jenna's corporate power play. There's one more thing, Cami said as we prepared to leave. Brett doesn't know about Jenna's real agenda either. He thinks he's in love with Allison, thinks they're going to have this great life together. He has no idea that he's just another pawn in her game. What happens to him when Jenna's done? She'll destroy him too. She's already been collecting information about his business practices, his other affairs, his financial problems. Once Allison's career is ruined and she gets the promotion, Brett becomes a liability. I walked Cami to her car, my mind already working on how to use this information. Can you get me a meeting with the newspaper reporter? I think so, but Rick, once we do this, there's no going back. Everyone's going to know everything about all of us. Good. It's time for the truth to come out. As I drove home, I thought about the irony of the situation. I'd spent 2 weeks planning revenge against the people who'd destroyed my marriage, only to discover that they were victims too. Jenna Walsh had manipulated all of us, me, Allison, Brett, even her own friends, for her own selfish purposes. But that didn't change what needed to happen next. If anything, it made it more important. Jenna thought she was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. She was about to learn that some of us had been playing a completely different game all along. The final act was about to begin, and this time, I had all the pieces I needed to win. Sunday morning, I met with Sarah Chen, the investigative reporter from the Millbrook Gazette. Sarah was young, ambitious, and hungry for a story that would make her career. When Cami and I laid out the evidence of Jenna's manipulation campaign, her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "This is incredible," she said, scrolling through the text messages and videos on Cami's phone. "A corporate conspiracy that destroyed multiple lives, documented in real time by the perpetrators themselves." "Can you have it ready by tomorrow?" I asked. "I'll work all night if I have to. This is going to be front page, maybe picked up by the state papers." She looked up from her notes. "Are you sure you want to do this? Once this story breaks, everyone's going to know everything about your personal life." "They already do. The difference is, now they'll know the truth." While Sarah worked on the story, I had one final piece of business to take care of. Brett Daniels deserved to know what kind of woman he'd destroyed his life for. I found him at his lake house, sitting on the deck with a beer and a stack of real estate contracts. He looked up when I approached, his face immediately shifting to defensive hostility. "What the hell do you want, Rick?" "To give you some information you need to hear." "I'm not interested in anything you have to say." "You will be." I sat down across from him without being invited. "Tell me, Brett, how did you and Allison reconnect? Was it at that company party back in March?" His face flickered with surprise. "How did you know about that?" "Because I know about everything, including who arranged for you to be there." I told him about Jenna's manipulation, about the corporate conspiracy, about how he and Allison had been played like instruments in someone else's orchestra. I showed him copies of the text messages, the evidence of Jenna's real agenda. Brett's face went through a series of emotions: disbelief, anger, realization, and finally, a kind of sick understanding. "She's been using us," he said quietly. "All of us. You, me, Allison, even her own friends. We were all just pieces on her chessboard. But Allison and I, what we have is real. Is it? Or is it what Jenna convinced you both to feel?" I leaned forward. "Brett, I'm not trying to win my wife back. That ship has sailed, but you deserve to know what you're really getting into." He stared out at the lake, processing the information. "What happens now?" "Now you decide what kind of man you want to be. The kind who builds his happiness on someone else's manipulation, or the kind who faces the truth and deals with the consequences." I left him sitting there with his thoughts and his beer, staring at the evidence of how thoroughly he'd been played. Monday morning, the Millbrook Gazette hit the streets with a front-page story that set the town on fire. Local PR executive orchestrated marriage destruction for corporate gain. Sarah had done her job well. The story laid out every detail of Jenna's manipulation campaign, complete with screenshots of text messages and quotes from the videos. It painted a picture of calculated cruelty that made my birthday party humiliation look like a minor misunderstanding. By noon, the story had been picked up by 3 state newspapers and was trending on social media. Jenna Walsh went from small-town power broker to public pariah in the space of a few hours. I was at Pete's shop when Allison called, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "Rick, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Jenna, I trusted her. I know. She destroyed us. She destroyed everything, and I helped her do it." "Yes, you did. Is there any way we can fix this? Any way we can go back?" I looked out the window of Pete's office, watching the normal life of the town continue around us. People going to work, running errands, living their lives without the drama that had consumed mine for the past month. "No, Allison, there's no going back. Too much has been said, too much has been done. We're different people now than we were before all this started. But if we know the truth now, the truth doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't undo the choices you made, the things you said, the way you let your friends vote on our marriage like it was a reality TV show." She was quiet for a long moment. "What happens now?" "Now we both live with the consequences of our choices. You figure out who you are without Jenna pulling your strings, and I figure out who I am without you." "And Brett?" "Brett's a grown man. He can make his own decisions. After I hung up, Pete handed me a cup of coffee and sat down across from me. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Empty," I said honestly. For 3 weeks, revenge was the only thing that mattered. Now that it's over, I don't know what comes next. Now, you rebuild. You take everything you learned about yourself during this mess, and you use it to build something better. What if I don't like who I became? Then you become someone else. That's the thing about rock bottom, Rick. It's a solid foundation to build on. The fallout from the newspaper story was swift and comprehensive. Jenna Walsh was fired from the PR firm within hours of the story breaking. Mindy Patterson was placed on administrative leave from the bank pending an investigation into her conduct. Cami Rodriguez, having cooperated with the investigation, kept her job, but became a pariah among her former friends. Brett Daniels' real estate business took a massive hit as clients canceled contracts and potential buyers looked elsewhere. His reputation as a home wrecker made him toxic in a town where family values still mattered. And Allison? She moved back in with her parents, her career in ruins, her social circle destroyed, her future uncertain. The woman who'd thought she deserved better than boring old Rick discovered that sometimes what you deserve and what you get are two very different things. As for me, I found that revenge was a dish best served with a side of truth. The town rallied around me in a way that was both gratifying and embarrassing. My auto repair business boomed as people went out of their way to support the local guy who'd been wronged. I was invited to parties, set up on dates, treated like a hero who'd slain a dragon. But heroes are supposed to feel triumphant, and mostly I just felt tired. 6 months later, I was closing up the shop when a familiar car pulled into the lot. Brett Daniels got out, looking older and more worn than I remembered. "Rick, you got a minute?" I nodded, curious despite myself. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "For what?" "For telling me the truth. About Jenna, about all of it." He ran a hand through his hair. "I broke it off with Allison after the story came out. Couldn't trust anything we had together, knowing it was built on manipulation." "How's she doing?" "Not great. She's in therapy, trying to figure out who she is without people telling her what to think." He paused. "She asks about you sometimes." "What do you tell her?" "That you're doing well, that you deserve to be happy." "Do I?" Brett looked at me for a long moment. "We all do, Rick. Even after everything we've done, we all deserve a chance to be better than our worst moments." After he left, I sat in my empty shop, thinking about forgiveness and redemption and whether people really could change. I thought about the man I'd been before my birthday party, and the man I'd become during my campaign of revenge, and who I wanted to be going forward. The truth was, I'd learned something important about myself during those dark weeks. I was capable of more than I'd ever imagined, more cunning, more ruthlessness, more strategic thinking than I'd known I possessed. The question was whether I'd use those abilities to build something positive or let them consume me. I locked up the shop and drove home to my empty house, where I made myself dinner and watched the news and went to bed alone. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was honest. It was mine. And for the first time in months, that felt like enough. 1 year later, I sold the house and moved to a small apartment above Morrison's Diner. I kept the auto shop but hired an assistant, giving myself time to pursue other interests. I started taking photography classes, began volunteering at the animal shelter, even went on a few dates with women who knew my story and didn't care. Allison moved to Portland, started over with a new job and a new therapist, and what she hoped was a new perspective on life. We never spoke again, but I heard through the small-town grapevine that she was doing better, learning to make her own decisions without a committee of friends to guide her. Jenna Walsh left Maine entirely, her reputation too damaged to rebuild locally. Last I heard, she was working for a small marketing firm in Ohio, probably plotting her next move up the corporate ladder. Brett Daniels reinvented himself as a handyman, using his real estate knowledge to help people fix up their homes instead of selling them. It was honest work, and it suited him better than the slick developer persona he'd worn before. And me? I learned that revenge is like fire. It can warm you or burn you, depending on how you handle it. I'd gotten my justice, exposed the truth, and made sure that actions had consequences. But in the end, the most important consequence was what I chose to do with the rest of my life. I chose to build instead of destroy, to create instead of manipulate, to be honest instead of clever. It wasn't always easy, but it was always mine. On a warm summer evening, exactly 2 years after my birthday party, I was sitting on the back deck of my apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Mrs. Weathers, now living in the senior center but still the town's unofficial intelligence network, had stopped by for coffee and gossip. "You know," she said, settling into her chair with a satisfied sigh, "I always knew that girl was trouble. Too pretty, too ambitious, too willing to listen to the wrong people." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe she was just young and confused and made some bad choices. You're more forgiving than I would be." "I'm not forgiving her, Mrs. Weathers. I'm forgiving myself." She looked at me with those sharp eyes that had seen 80 years of human nature in all its complexity. For what? For letting revenge consume me. For becoming someone I didn't recognize. For forgetting that the best way to defeat your enemies is to live well despite them. And are you? Living well? I looked out at the sunset, at the town spread below us, at the life I'd built from the ashes of my old one. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was earned. It was mine. "Yeah," I said, "I think I am." As the sun disappeared behind the mountains and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I thought about second chances and new beginnings and the strange ways that life can break you down just to build you up stronger. My wife had told our friends that I wasn't her type anymore. She was right. I wasn't the same man she'd married, the same man who'd blown out birthday candles and made wishes that would never come true. I was better.